tonight we are very excited to welcome everyone to Romance and the Resistance. Joining us tonight, we have Alisha Rai, whose new book, Wrong to Need You, is the second in her Forbidden Heart series. Also with us is Alyssa Cole, promoting A Hope Divided, the second novel in her Civil War-era Loyalty League series. And Alyssa and Alicia are in conversation tonight with Sarah Wendell. Sarah is a reviewer for the popular romance website Smart Bitches Trashy Books, as well as the author of Everything I Know About Love I Learned from Romance Novels. So please join me in welcoming our authors to Politics and Prose.
All right. You guys ready to do this?
I think so.
Do your mics work?
Okay,
your mics are working?
Yeah.
So, first of all, thank you for resisting all of the traffic.
Yeah.
And the inclination to be like, I could go home and not wear real pants. So if you're wearing real pants and you came here tonight with us, thank you, because it's so awesome. If you are standing and you would like to sit, there are some chairs in the middle. I promise I won't ask you math questions or make you feel awkward, but if you feel like you want to sit down, just please come sit down. It's totally cool. All right, so welcome. We are here to talk about Romance and the Resistance, which is great because we had a conference call about this, the three of us last night. Mm-hmm. Yep, and I have questions. I've just scrapped all of them.
Oh no!
And we're going with we're going with a pop quiz on algebra.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
I would fail.
Yeah, I'm right behind you. Like my kids don't even bother asking me for help. They're like, "We'll just wait."
Let us just tell you, we scheduled a conference call with Sarah last night, and then we went to Target and forgot about it. And so
True story. But
and she texted us like 10 minutes in, and she goes, "I'm ready whenever you guys are," and we're like, "Oh."
And I was like, strawberries. So I live on an island, and
like literally,
I was just in Target, like getting all of the things that I can't get on the island, and totally forgot about Sarah. So
And
I'm
one of
sorry
those
about
hey,
things-
I am
one of those
way
things
down on that list.
It's strawberries, and she saw the strawberries, and she goes, $3.49, and like bought them, and then ate the whole tub while we were on the conference call.
Everyone doesn't need to know.
Wait. Something happened at that Target, and it involved Idris Elba, right?
Yeah, my book was there.
Her book was in the Target.
there.
Now I know that I'm currently in a bookstore, so I look kind of like a rude human being. But y'all, seriously, Idris Elba was looking at her book.
Well, I made him look at me, but that's his like book, whatever movie, the book version of
Kate
it was
Winslet
there.
might have been there. We don't care.
Well, he wasn't looking at Kate. He
Nope.
was looking at me.
Looking at her.
So, okay, sorry. Continue your introductions.
It was a bad romance cover, but it was a good Idris
They
cover.
weren't looking at each other. There was no clinch, but it freed him up to gaze longingly at her book, which is exactly what you want. So congrats on your releases, you guys.
Thank you.
Yay!
Thank you.
So exciting. Okay. So because those books released, today's Thursday, so 2 days ago, right? People who are here who work in publishing, is it like 2020 for you right now, 2021? Like it's not 2019. So in January it becomes 2019 for all the publishing people. Okay, so if you don't work in publishing, works very far in advance. They never write checks at the grocery store because it's a disaster. So your book came out 2 days ago. Your books came out. I will not spoil anything for those of you who are here who have not read it. Do not worry. I might ask them about their favorite scenes, but we're not going to spoil them. I will say there is very high likelihood they end happily. But I want to start by asking, because we're going to do Romance and the Resistance, I'm going to start with the romance part. Which of each other's books, which scene in each other's books did you like best?
For me, I like the scene when Jackson is getting to know his nephew. One of the things in the story is that the hero has been gone from town for a long time, and he returns. He has a nephew, and he is in love with his brother's, the widow of his brother who has passed away. And so he doesn't really know his nephew, and he's getting to know him, and he's also not great at talking to people, and it was just a very sweet, it's not part of the romance aspect, but I thought it was a very sweet and cute scene of him trying to get close to a child, and I liked it.
Oh. Absolutely zero plot moppetry with these children, by the way. Like, they're actual real children. It's pretty rad. Ma'am?
So my favorite scene in Alyssa's book is a little bit conceited because it's an homage to me.
This This is true.
It's true.
Wait, hold up, because one of the worst characters in her book is named Sarah. Do I need to be concerned here?
No.
Okay.
It was a very common name.
I know. Believe me, I know. Thank you, Sarah. It is still a common
If it was Sarah Wendell, maybe you might be.
Okay.
But it was not.
I'm just checking because my ego is feeling. Anyway, so
So,
homage to you.
Yes. Well, okay. So Alyssa has like a front row seat to like my entire love life. And so when she was writing this book, I was seeing this guy who we affectionately referred to as Robot because he wanted to be a robot. Like that's what he said. He didn't like emotions. Like he was very scientific and very rational and very logical, and he did not like emotions. And he would always tell me he would never fall in love with me, which is very fun to hear when you're in a relationship with someone.
Wait, anyone here who's been dating, have you heard or met this guy? I've met him.
I met him and I was like, yeah, sign me up. And so I dated him.
And my hero happens to share these tendencies.
And so one day we were out to dinner. I don't remember what date it was. And, after the 18th time, he had told me he would never love anyone. And he kept talking about his sister, his little sister. And he was like, oh, I love this girl. Like, he didn't say I love. He was like, oh, she's so smart. Oh, she's like valedictorian. She's going to grad school, like blah, 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 forever about his sister, right? And so finally I was like, aha, I see it. And so I said, you love your sister. And he goes, no, I don't believe in love. And I said, so you don't love your sister? And he's like, no. And I said, okay, so in the trolley situation, there's 5 people on the track. There's one person over here, and I'd let some time go by so I wouldn't be connected to his sister. And he's like, of course I'd kill the one person to save the 5. Like, that's utilitarianism. And I was like, okay, fine. Let's make that one person your sister. And he goes, oh, I'd kill the 5. And I was like, because you love her. You love her? And that's why. And he goes, no. She is cognitively superior to other humans. And so I went home that night and I was like, Alyssa, this guy. And so I told her and she goes, that sounds like my hero. That sounds like something he would say. So in her book, there's 2 times? Yeah, 2 times that you and Will talk about. Yeah, where he talks about being like someone being cognitively superior. And it's wonderful in that book because there's a happily ever after. And not so great in real life.
No, not. And it's adorable because he means it as the deepest compliment.
Right. And
not
this was
as
the deepest compliment. Yes.
Really is.
But it was hard to deal with in a relationship.
That guy's a tool.
He was. Yeah. It's very attractive.
It happens that way, doesn't it?
That way.
He doesn't have to believe in love.
Yes, that's the problem.
Yeah, you've met that guy. So the other thing we're talking about tonight, and we're going to mix back and forth with these topics, is the resistance. And I was getting ready for this panel, and I actually found your swag, Alisha, from, I think this was RT in spring. So she gave out buttons, and one says, resist with love, and the other one says, HEA, happy ever after, is resistance. So this has been a theme for you for most of the year. Can't imagine why. No. Can you talk a little bit about what went into making these buttons? Why is happy ever after the resistance? Why do we resist with love?
So, I think in general, like emotions in a way are kind of resistance, right? Because does anyone follow Johnny Sun? Mm-hmm. Okay. He has this really cute Twitter where he pretends to be an alien, basically. And it's an alien, like, discovering the world. And he's very popular. He has a book out now. It's very cute. And his whole, like, I listened to a podcast with him not too long ago with Another Round, which is, like, a great podcast if you listen to that. And he talked about how he's very committed to being, like, genuine and authentic because he thinks that, like, irony is basically giving up. Like, it's not hard to be cynical, and it's not hard to be sort of despair and to, look around the world and just say, well, everything's terrible, so why do we bother loving each other? Why do we bother, having happy endings? Why are we even in pursuit of this anymore? That's not that difficult. I think it is like a challenge to get up every day and to face the world and say, there's still hope out there. And, I don't think that idealism is naive if you are cognizant of all the terrible stuff in the world. But it is every day you get up and you do that, where you are genuine and you're authentic and you're excited about something, whether it's even the smallest things like, oh my God, I got out of bed and I brushed my teeth. Like, that's something, So I think doing that every day, especially if you're, a woman, a marginalized member of society in one way or another, I think it is amazingly just resisting everything that's pushing you down and telling you not to.
And that's part of romance too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because the element of romance that we all read it for, at least that I read it for, I can't speak for everybody, is that I know that it's all going to be okay in the end. Even if it's not okay right now, if it's not okay, then it's not the end. Because it's going to be okay in the end, because that's the promise that I am made by this book.
And the black moment, it's always overcome. Like
Yes.
whenever there's a romance and you have a black moment, even if it's a tiny black moment, like it could be like slight misunderstanding or something like that. And you go, oh, I don't know if this is going to work out. And then it does. So like that is the promise that you have in every romance you pick up.
And when you live in a news world where there's a black moment like semi-hourly, like
Every 5 minutes?
every 5 minutes, I haven't looked at Twitter in the last 45. Who the
Okay.
hell knows what's on fire right now? Persisting in believing in happiness is a form of resistance, which I also agree with, because we talked about the idea that happiness is subversive. You had talked about that a lot when we were having lots of conversations about this panel, Alyssa. Why do you find subversiveness in happiness and in romance? And where do you find it?
Well, I think in general. Is it on? Can you guys hear me? Okay. I think in general in romance, like you said, the happily ever after is somewhat subversive in that the world tells us that, you know, I like literary fiction and all the other forms of fiction, but they say that, oh, if your book has a happy ending, then it's not serious, it's not important, it's fluff, because the only things that are important, I guess, is something that causes you pain. But happily ever after and all of the other aspects of romance are like, as humans, we need escape from pain. That's why we created stories to begin with. That's why people first started telling stories around fire. We didn't just want to sit and stare at the fire and think about how our brother got eaten by a jackalope or whatever. So I think the subversiveness, especially of romance, and especially of modern romance, in that, which is more inclusive of many different groups, because especially if you're from a marginalized group, if you were in any kind of story, you were generally like the red shirt. You were the person who was going to get killed, who was going to have some kind of tragic ending to better the hero or heroine of the other story. So one aspect of the subversiveness, I think there are layers. There's the subversiveness of women choosing happiness, finding people that make them happy, and finding careers and going after their goals, which I think is a part of most romances. You don't generally find ones where women are just like, okay, well, I'm just gonna, not do whatever makes me happy, whether that's a job, having children, or starting a charity, whatever, and marry some bum who's gonna beat me up. Like, that's not a romance. So there's that layer of subversiveness of kind of saying, okay, it's all right for you to want happiness and better things in your life. And then there's the other layers of, for example, LGBTQ romance, where you say, okay, we're gonna live at the end of this story. We're gonna have happy endings, we're not gonna die. And romance for people of color, where it's like, okay, we're actually going to show you being loved and appreciated and not just a side character in the story. So I think there are like a lot of different layers, and also just in general, just resisting the idea of happiness as something that is kind of unimportant in the lives of humans.
Oh, yes.
I think it's like you called it escapism, and I think that's like a word that sometimes gets a negative connotation when women want it. Like when a man has escapism, it's science fiction, right? Like, that's cool.
Or
football.
Or James Bond,
or a beer
like so many other
commercial,
things.
or
Right, yes.
Yeah.
The horse or whatever, yeah, like the beer commercials. Yeah, like there's so many forms. Oh, are we?
I'm sorry, George R. R. Martin is here? Oh, he is up there. So there's your, oh my
Sorry,
God,
George.
he's gonna give you a concussion.
He is. Sorry, George. But when it's women who want escapism, it's seen as like something to be derided, but you need it. Like, you can't function in a world where everything sometimes feels like it's terrible without some way to get away from it. And even if that's for a few minutes, it's not like you are forgetting everything else in the world. I wish.
I saw flashing lights and was like, what now? That's a street cleaner. All right, we're cool. Sorry.
Yeah, in DC sometimes you have to worry. But
Right?
No,
I mean, come on. We're not even joking about things looking black moment.
but no, yeah, but like that's the thing for people of color, for LGBTQ, for women in general. It is, you need something that will give you the hope that you need to function in our world.
And I would say all literature is a form of escapism. It's literally putting yourself into another story and seeing from a different point of view. And it's only really derided for certain forms of literature. So.
And there's also a resistance in being a romance reader, because when you're a romance reader, you get put down a lot for what you like. And there are many, many people who feel very free to tell you what they think of what you're reading if they see you reading it. And I've often done a lot of interviews where people talk to me about, well, what about reader shaming? And I actually haven't met that many romance readers who hold shame for what they read, because it makes us happy. What they hold is the continued reminder from other people that they ought to feel ashamed about what they're reading, but not so much we don't. And there's resistance in containing and in maintaining a reading habit of romance. So even reading romance, I think, is also being part of the resistance, because you are embracing and holding on to the idea that happiness is an absolutely acceptable and laudable thing to look for in your reading material. Also, good sex. Speaking of. No. I do actually want to ask you both, one of the things that I really liked about both of the newest books and the previous books in the series, and I promise no spoilers, is that there are communities of women supporting one another in both of your books, whether it's family or friends, and friendships that take place almost entirely on a cell phone in the Civil War. And that was a really bad Instagram, you guys. You have no idea. So there's friendships that take place only in your pocket, and that person is always there for you, but you never see them. And there's friendships and supporting of your family, and there's groups of women. And the idea, one of the things that was like, we've had this conversation about this panel like a couple of times, and I'm really actually excited to finally do it, because I get to share this cool conversation with everyone here. I just like, okay, so talk now, say more words. Go ahead. One of the things that you make sure to include is these relationships of women supporting one another. And both of you have talked about in other panels and in other discussions and in interviews that women are often the drivers of change in small and large ways. And that also happens in your books. Was it a challenge to write those, or was that sort of like, well, duh?
For me, it's just a natural part of any story, especially stories that are primarily focused on women. And particularly, I think in all of my books, but particularly in historicals, it's just historically accurate. For example, the novella Let Us Dream, which was about a black cabaret owner who was also pushing for women's suffrage in 1917 New York. And it was kind of, these were people who were not in the upper classes of society. They were prostitutes and cabaret owners and number runners and things like that. But the things that connected them were like, we're all women and we're here trying to support each other. And I think if you look at any major movement in American history, women were at the forefront of it. Like I was talking to these guys about it, like the civil rights movement, we often think of like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, but like one of the biggest drivers of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s was that black women kept getting raped, and they were not no one was getting charged for it. I mean, this is still a problem for all women today, but a lot of the community groups that were formed by women, and were trying to, like Rosa Parks, that was before she sat down on the bus that day, that was her biggest form of community activism. So it's just these kinds of things, I think, when I'm writing and I'm doing my research, it's the things that you come across again and again. And in A Hope Divided, one of the things that I focus on is that there were these groups of poor women. Like, one of the things of the Confederacy was like, oh, we are doing this to protect like the sanctity of women and things like that. But they had a very small definition, or slim definition of what women were. If you were poor, if you weren't white, if you didn't fit into a certain aspect of society, then they could, they didn't really care about what happened to you. So then those women had to kind of work together to survive. So I think it just kind of comes naturally in doing the research. And for the contemporaries, it's just, I think about my relationships with my friends and my family and incorporate those things.
I think that's been one of my favorite changes in the genre over the past few years, is the number of books I've read where there's a community of women. Because I mean, there's a whole bunch of books where it's a whole bunch of guys who hold the series together, and now I'm seeing more and more series about women. which is really interesting because when you talk about history, usually the women are erased from history, and you're bringing them back to the forefront. Like the men are cool, they're fine, they're good, they're great, but you're focusing on what women have contributed to history and to contemporary world. And the same with your books too.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, someone posted like a page from some famous woman's memoir. I'm blanking on the name right now, but to paraphrase, the page said something like, I had a number of wonderful female friends and then a string of lovers, and that's it. Because when I went out to dinner with my female friends, I knew I would come back whole. And I was like, whoa, that's like me. But like way more like articulate. But I was like, oh, that's, you know, I've always had women friends. And lately I feel like especially, you know, we all, like I moved around a lot as a kid. I don't have friendships from like elementary school or kindergarten or whatever that I've still maintained. But I do have friendships from different parts of my life, and we've all spread out across the country or in different countries. And the way you keep in contact with them is through your phone or through, you know, chats or whatever. I mean, I get hundreds of group chats, I feel like, a day. And I manage them. I mean, Sarah lives like not too far from me, and we still mostly communicate through text. And I think that, you know, whenever I hear someone say like, oh, put down your phone because you're missing the real world, I'm like, you want me to sacrifice my friends so I can like what, eat lunch? Like, please, you know, like.
And those relationships are real.
These relationships are real. Like they're my
real.
like pocket friends. I heard someone call them, and I like that. Like they're my pocket friends. Like they're always in my pocket. And
I love how some of the people in the audience are like, "Yep,
yeah,
no, next to my pocket friends.
These are your real friends, right?
I'm in the
and
room
like
with them
they're-
right
yeah.
now."
Like, and maybe you see them once in a while, but they're no less your friends. And I feel like women especially have used technology like from the minute it was possible to do that. Like we have always sort of, I think, and it's connected to romance too.
Absolutely.
I mean, romance has always been at the forefront of using technology. We were the first ones in the digital publishing game. We were the first ones to self-publish and make it successful. So yeah, I think it's always sort of been, and it's been, I mean, when I found the romance community when I was like 13 or 14 on AOL message boards, like I was like, oh my God, it's like a ready-made friendship. Like everybody sort of has a automatic kinship, and you make your friends. We were at an event on Tuesday, and it was so cute because these strangers who did not know each other were in the audience before we started. We were just kind of like creepily eavesdropping, and they were just like recommending books to each other. Like they were like, oh, have you read this? Have you read that? And like, you know, you automatically become friends. So yeah, when I write my books, I mean, in contemporary settings, I think it's automatic. And that doesn't mean you can't have a toxic woman in there, right? Like you have had toxic friendships. You've had toxic coworkers who are women. I think the problem comes in when you make all the other women toxic, and then the heroine's like the shining beacon of womanhood. Like that becomes a little weird. But yeah, I think that it's pretty natural, even if you maybe are socially awkward. Maybe you don't have you're introverted. You don't have a lot of friends you see every day, or you work at home or whatever. Like it is easier daily now to make friends. And if you feel like you don't have enough friends, just go on Twitter, go on Facebook. You know what?
Small. I'm gonna stop. Don't go on Twitter. You might make friends with go to the don't just show up, because that could end badly.
But find the people that you like.
Yes,
and then
find those. Come talk to us.
Like it is easy. Like it is much easier to curate friends who you don't have to even see. You know. So.
And if being with people is really exhausting for you, this is
a great way to do it. But.
So another thing I want to ask you before we open it up to the room for questions, and I've planted a horrible question in the audience because I'm evil. We've talked a lot about the forms of resistance that romance readers can do by finding authors, by seeking out authors of color, by seeking out own voices, characters of color, stories that aren't the very well-established romance of white, heterosexual, cisgendered Christian Americans in small towns with really good-looking Adirondack chairs. And my neighbor has them, and they get real gross in a hurry. So whoever's keeping the Adirondack chairs in the cover art, we need to have a talk, because I don't know how that works. But anyway, when you seek outside of what you're constantly presented with, that is a form of resistance. And when you write cultural inclusivity and religious inclusivity, you are increasing the ability of someone to read a romance and say, I see myself, which is like the best feeling. What other things can we do now? What more can we do? No pressure. You have 5 seconds.
within the romance community?
I am open to
In
anything.
the world
I mean, I think George is fine up there. You're good. Yeah, he's not going to hit you. He's not going to fall on you.
I'm not scared of George R.R. Martin. But
I hear he's very cuddly.
I think some things in general, just being involved in your communities, whether that's online or if you're able, in your real world communities, volunteering, and whether that be politically or reading at a library or mentoring children or teenagers who need it, or adults helping with adult literacy. I think there are a lot of different ways, and the internet makes it so much easier. There are a lot of things that you can do online, helping with databases, calling if you don't want to leave your house, for like political campaigns and things like that. And just also educating yourself, finding out more about how the government in general works, your local government, and how you want it to work, and maybe doing the small things you can to push it in that direction. Because I think, just speaking for myself, I thought I was pretty literate in how the government works, and learned very quickly, no, I was not. I was like, hey, how come we can't just stop like all this bad stuff happening? And there are rules.
Surprise.
There are rules. So, just learning how things work, supporting people, grassroots movement, finding people before they get to the governorship and, the representatives and things like that, and kind of looking at how all of the little things in your community have a ripple effect to the larger things that start being really messed up. So yeah, just starting at a grassroots level, I guess.
I'll take it in a publishing and books perspective. I mean, like, this is DC. There's so many things that you could and should do, but talk to your libraries, and have them, if they don't have the books that you love from the authors you love, tell them to get them. And most of them will buy it. Like, if it's like a legit request, they'll buy it. And
in my library system is one button.
Yeah,
request.
It's just one button. It's so easy, and you can just go request things, and they'll take a look at it, and then they'll buy it. And then other people can read the books you love. I grew up in a library. Like, my parents were always busy. Like, they were always working. The library raised me after school for most of my elementary school and middle school, and I started reading romances in the library, and I think it's a great place. I mean, that does help us, because those kids and teens, I mean, kids aren't really reading our books, hopefully, but let's face it. But I mean, like, our genre starts young, right? Like, we are like 13, 14, 15 and reading books we maybe shouldn't be reading, because there's like naked people on the cover. I don't know who that's referring to, but yeah, so those are people who are going to grow up, and they're going to grow up reading these books, maybe of people who look like them, or maybe of people who don't. And that's how studies have shown media affects how we see the world. Like, it is the difference of seeing a Pooh on The Simpsons versus the Mindy Show or something like that. When you see different characters, that's how it affects your brain. So for people who can't maybe afford to go out and buy, or can't because they're too young, or they don't have the money or whatever, libraries are their best bet. So make friends with your local DC Public Library branch, or Maryland or Virginia or wherever you happen to live. I assume no one came from farther out than that. But yeah, make friends with them and talk to them, and press a button and get the books that you love in there.
Can I answer my own question, because I'm a total jerk?
Yes.
I think that it is amazing how much technology connects you to involvement. Like, I drop my kids off at music lessons because I'm a horrible parent and let my children play the drums and the electric guitar. And I'm walking to the grocery store, and I get a text message from an organization that I had subscribed to by text. And they said, there's a bill in Congress that you said you were interested in. Would you be interested in calling your representative? And I'm like, well, I'm going to Safeway. I'm not really busy, so sure. So I hit call. I just press call and hit send. And I'm in Safeway looking for the thing I need, which I can never find because I hate the grocery store. And I get connected to a message that tells me exactly what to say, exactly what the bill number is, and exactly what the problem is. And then they connect me to my congressman's office. And I'm like, hi, I'm so-and-so. This is my zip code. Here's the issue. I'm calling about this bill. I have a problem. I believe it was the concealed permit reciprocity bill, which allows concealed carry reciprocity. And it took me longer to find what I was looking for in the grocery store than it did to talk to my congressman. And the staff people there are on the phone all the time. It was so easy.
ResistBot too. For those of you
ResistBot
who
is
don't
amazing.
know it.
You don't even have to talk on the phone.
You don't even have to talk on the phone because they send a
amazing.
fax. I don't know what that is. But they last time, when the last healthcare bill was up, I got a text from them and it said, you live in a blue state, so you're not too worried. But if you have friends who live in this, and this state, please contact them and ask them to use our service, and we'll figure it out for them. So I was like,
then
that
you're text
like
messaging.
they are proactive, and you just text your friends or whatever in those states, and have them send the fax or whatever. It's very easy, and you don't even have to talk to anyone.
And the other thing is to keep coming to events like this one. The fact that you came means that this is important to you, which is wonderful because I work on the internet and I speak to you all every day virtually. But the fact that you came here is an enormous, enormous thing, because I know it's hard to put on real pants and go outside. So thank you very much for that part too. Just being here and reading romance, I think, is continually resisting the negativity that we're told that we deserve, which we don't, by the way. You all deserve happy endings. Now, I would like to open it up to questions. It's about that time, right? I'm bad at time. So I have one question already planted. So up in the front here is Erica Sang, and she is Alicia's editor. So she edited the books that just came out. Nice job. Well done. Excellent work. Yay! That's
She's also
right.
Alyssa's editor.
Yes, A Princess in Theory, which comes out in February.
Right before the royal wedding.
Alicia is also my PR.
So I want to ask you, and I'm going to borrow one of your mics for this so I can get it on the recording. What was your favorite scenes in their books that you've read so far?
Well, I'm sorry, Alyssa, I haven't read your historical. But for Alicia's Wrong to Need You, my favorite scene is when Jackson cooks
Yes, thank you.
for Sadia for the first time, and her first bite, it made me both hungry and turned on at the same time. And it was just an amazing, amazing scene.
That man can
Can I-
crack an egg.
Oh my God.
Can I just say that it made me hungry and turned on at the same time can be applied to pretty much any.
Oh.
Yes, that's it.
You could also put that as a cover quote. Like, was anyone here in the room, would you buy a book that said, this book made me hungry and turned on at the same time? Yeah, right? That's like saying this book had too much sex. I would like that book right now. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I'm glad I warned you. All right.
Can I
Yes?
just add one thing to that? When
Yes.
I wrote that scene, before I wrote it, I Googled sexiest grilled cheese sandwiches. So that should tell you.
Oh my
It didn't give
God.
me any results. I had to figure it out on my own.
Your search history must be amazing.
Oh. And I say has a lot of fun with my search.
So who has questions? I love questions. I have more, but I like you guys a lot. Please don't be shy. What you can do is just shout them out, and then I will repeat them. Do. Yes! All right. The question is, how do you negotiate politics and the history of politics and researching political history when those things are also current as well?
You get really depressed. No. So for most of my historicals, they are pretty explicitly political in a way because there's no way they couldn't be with the types of characters I write, people of color and LGBTQ people, but people from marginalized groups. So there is going to be some, even if it's not the focus of the book, there is going to be some political impact on the characters in the book. And the way I usually navigate it is, I guess, just straight through. If someone doesn't like it, then they're not the reader meant for my book. I can't really try to soften anything. And in a way I do sometimes, even though it's still, for example, in the Civil War books, I have some things that are people get really mad about. And I'm like, you have no idea, that's the most, that's the softest version of that situation that I actually researched. But I mean, that's for me too, because I don't want to be completely demoralized every time I have to write a book. So I do try to find the good things in history as well, in political history as well as the bad things, and just try to focus on these terrible things happen. But the feeling I want to leave my readers with is these terrible things happened and are happening now, but people got through them. People have always fought them and persevered, and in the end, even though it sucks, in general, you know, the good guys always have some degree of winning, and things don't always get completely terrible, and when they do, we come back from that, because in general, you know, humans can be terrible, but we do try to strive toward being good. So.
And happiness is a victory.
Yes, and happiness is a victory. And even when things are terrible, there are people who are happy. Like, things are terrible right now, and we're pretty happy sometimes. So I think
Occasionally.
occasionally.
Yeah.
But you know, I think that's another thing that you know, when I said I was writing Civil War series, people were like, "What?" But like, there are bad things happening all the time, all over the world, and despite that, people still fall in love. People still have fun with their children. People still have fun with their friends. They find a way to do this in any society that is going through terrible things, and so we can't just kind of flatten the story to things were bad and everyone was having a terrible time. Even within terrible times, there are pockets of happiness, and yes, that is resistance to that, to the terrible times.
I think also, and it feels like especially lately, politics has become conflated with civil rights, like humanity. And in particular, I think for me, I want to push against that, and I don't think it should be political for anybody to be happy. And if it is, then like Alyssa said, it's probably not the reader base maybe for me. I will say I was actually writing Wrong to Need You around the time of the Muslim ban. My heroine is Pakistani American. She's Muslim, and the hero is half Japanese American. And his part of the plot of the series, for those who don't know, is about his grandfather, who's passed away, was in a Japanese internment camp. He was Japanese American, so he kind of carries that history. And she has a son who's also half, part Japanese American, and also Muslim. So, grappling with all of that, there's no Trump isn't in the book or anything like that. But that's, there's a scene in the book that, was kind of hard to write. It was, the son finds out about the internment camps about his great grandfather, and he asks his mom could that happen again? And she can't say no, but she gives the best answer she can, no, we'll protect we'll protect you. But that's what I think a lot of moms of color tell their children, especially now, we're going to protect you the best we can. It's the reality that you live with. But at the same time, we all live under a reality where anything can be taken from us at any time, right? It's so easy, and we're finding how easy it is for our humanity to be taken away from us. So, but we're still happy. We still have moments of happiness, and we can still have love, and we can still have all of that. So if for a reader, if they consider that politics, then I can't really help that. But I feel like it's I don't know if responsibility is too heavy of a word, but I think that it is part of our jobs is to think about that and to think about what message we're sending out when we create media that the world's going to consume.
I was just going to say, it's part of the job that you've elected to do with what you write. That's the right. job you've taken on. Mm-hmm. Now, you had a question, ma'am. Or did you're good? Okay, cool. So you want to know if there's going to be television shows of Alyssa's books? This is good questions.
That is
These
a good question.
These are very good questions.
I don't know. I hope so. I don't know Shonda. It was literally, my contribution is that when I was doing my interview, I was like, I want to recommend a lot of books. Can I recommend some books? And they were like, okay. So because my interview got kind of long because I just kept adding books that I liked, and I was like,
I have that problem.
And I was like, it would be better if we just made this into a separate thing, if that was cool. And they said, okay. And so that's my contribution. I would love it if my books became a television show, obviously, as every author would, or most authors would. But yeah, so, it's not like I'm hanging out with Shonda, unfortunately.
That's too bad.
But it is really cool, and it's nice being able to recommend books to people. I just like telling people about things that I like. Obviously, that's why I'm an author, so I can force people to read about things that I like.
Captive audience.
So yeah, that aspect is cool. The other part,
Fingers crossed. I saw a question over here. Yes, ma'am.
I think with anything, there has to be a level of them being open to something new. Yep. And I think really quickly, in any group, you can tell when someone is genuinely earnest about wanting to try something new. And in that case, like, I've never seen anybody in romance like gatekeep, or, you know, they're like, oh, here's like 80 books I love, you know, like, here's my entire Goodreads shelf. I have it like sorted by age.
You just
of
got
like
paid?
hero.
That's
like,
great.
yeah, like, you know, let's go. And but you know, I think there is some level of, you know, women or men or whatever who think that it's, you know, beneath them and whatever. I think I'm just kind of tired of trying to convince people that we're great. I think they'll either come to us like earnestly seeking, like figure out what we like about it and everything. In that case, I'm, you know, more than happy. But I think that, you know, sort of beating your head against a wall or trying to gain someone's approval is like, you know, it's not. There's so many other things we could be. We could be like reading and writing so many great books in that time.
See, this is like my job, so I'm
Yeah,
just
I know.
yeah, I got a lot of strategies for you.
I have a slightly different answer, just because I think it's been really like ingrained into people that it's a reflexive response sometimes when you say romance, that people are just like, oh, those kinds of books, or oh, trashy books, or oh, things like that. And like, it is annoying, and like, I definitely am not always nice when people say things like that. But I do think like if they're your friends and people who you were kind of like trying to invite into this world that you really love, you would do it like with any fandom that you were part of. Like, if there's something you really, 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 like a book you really love, you don't have to be like, oh, here is this like romance, and this is you can just say, here's this book I love, can you give it a try? And if they say something silly, you can just say like, why don't you just try it and see if you like it? If they don't want to try it, then you can't really do much more than that, because then you start becoming like, you know, that person who.
Yeah.
But it's like if you have a favorite show that you like, you would say, oh, this episode, like for me, I've had shows that I loved, and obviously, like I just said, I always try to force people to like things that I like. So sometimes I'd be like, you should watch the show, and I would keep telling them how cool the show is, and they wouldn't want to watch it. And then I would say, oh, I'm about to watch this episode, and I would have an episode that I really liked. Sometimes it's more effective to just have them watch an episode and then they say, oh, the show is cool, than to keep trying to tell them how cool the show is. So like, I would just say like, maybe if they seem resistant, you can just say, I like this book, see if you like it too. And if they aren't receptive, then, you know, that sucks for them because they're missing out.
I'm not an anime fan, and Alyssa is a big time anime fan, and she loves Yuri on Ice a lot. And she kept telling me to watch it like a million times, and I wouldn't. So when we were at RT, we were sitting down to dinner, and she pops out her iPad and just turns it on. And then
you have no choice.
Anytime I like tried to look at my phone, I could just see her like turn and look at me.
It has subtitles. It has subtitles, and she was missing.
So maybe don't do that.
She watched the whole thing.
Somewhere between maybe my response of whatever and her response of, I'm just gonna shove it in your face now.
I do have a third option for you. Because I do this all the time. I get a lot of email like, oh, I've never really liked those books, but I read this one and it was really good, and maybe you could tell me if there are more?
That opening is good though.
Oh,
that
yes.
you, like,
Sometimes you have somebody who's like, oh, the thing that always works for me is telling people how they're going to feel when they're done. I think one of the major reasons there was that book with the gray, there was some shades of them. One of the reasons why that spread like wildflower is because I think women were saying to other women, this book is great for my sex life. And I don't know anybody who's like, oh, orgasms that are good, I don't want those. God, good sex. Blech. That's part of why that book spread so quickly, because people were like, this is good for certain things that we don't talk about normally. So I think if you talk about how the book is going to make you feel, I felt so happy when I read this book. This book just made me so happy, or I felt great, or this was exactly my catnip, and every reader has their catnip. You know how there's like 4 out of 5 dentists agree, something. I actually think that 5 out of 5 readers are reading romance. Just that one doesn't know that that's what they're reading. And it's okay. You can put an Adirondack chair and some shoes on the cover, and we'll pretend it's something else. That's fine. But we know it's romance. So if you tempt them with the result, and however that result might be, because it's different genres. So how much time do we have for more questions? Oh, bring it. There's someone in the back, actually. Okay. Yeah. It's hard to see her. Hi. So your question is, how do each of these writers deconstruct the stereotypical images of black women that you are very familiar with in fiction and show what's actually happening behind the scenes of those portrayals? Do I have that right? I'm not repeating it because you didn't say it right. I'm repeating it for the recording.
For me, a lot of my writing is driven by being annoyed at something.
She's so petty. Oh my God.
I am. I'm very nice, but I'm also very petty. And so a lot of times sometimes when I'm writing these characters, and also I just really am interested in how, like most writers, I'm interested in how people work and how they become who they become. And I think, like for example, the whole Civil War series was in part driven by the fact that I was annoyed that there were all of these things that I didn't know about the Civil War, because everything I knew was like Gone with the Wind or North and South and brother versus brother and these kind of like flat caricatures of what was going on during the war. So I decided I'm going to try and write something a little different. It's not like I'm really thinking this through. It's just kind of what's, later on when I think about what's going on. So what the thing you're talking about specifically is, I think, in a way, I don't really think of it as deconstructing. That is what the final product is. But I think just in a way, I really, no matter what kind of character I'm writing, if it's the white male hero or the South Asian Muslim hero or the African American heroine, I want, as a writer, to understand why they're doing what they're doing, and that comes through, I think, for the reader to never have any questions. Because I think for me, I feel like it's a failure as a writer if when a reader finishes a book, they say, I don't understand why this person did this thing, or I don't understand why they would do this. And also because if I'm reading a book, it bothers me if I don't know the motivation for characters doing something. It makes me feel like I missed something, and then I start going back pages, or in a movie or anything like that. Where you are trying to connect with the characters and then suddenly they do something and you're like, wait, why did they do that? Or what would cause them to do that? And in a movie it could be a scene was chopped out or something. And so when in the books, I just try to put as much information as possible without like info dumping or without boring the reader, to show why a person is the way there is and is the way they are. And the with Black women in particular, they have been portrayed very specifically, especially in historical things, and in contemporary too. That's changing now, but I think just in a lot of ways I'm like, again, I try and do it for all characters, but I definitely want to make some things clear, like people don't just become this way, and like for every character, but particularly for my heroines. There are a million different factors that would lead someone to have to feel that they can't show their emotions, or that they have to, keep repressing their emotions and just keep getting on. So, again, I try and do it for all of the characters, but if it helps people understand Black women as I write them, because obviously, there are so many different writers writing people differently, then that's good in the end.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is that a lot of like what we consider a strong female character has been shaped by men, right? And the easiest way to denote a strong female character is to give her a sword and a leather jacket, and then she's done, right? And like a fancy belt.
And lack of
Don't
emotion.
forget the belt.
And yeah, there's a fancy belt, like a tactical gear belt.
With the studs on it.
And that's it. And then
Yep.
she like kind of saunters in
In heels.
Right, yes. In heeled boots. And that's it. That's a strong female character. And then I think there is another layer of, for women of color in particular, part of them being strong is being alone. And this is something, like we've talked about this in regards to Hidden Figures. There was a popular feminist who wrote sort of this review about Hidden Figures, and she said one of the issues she had with it was that focused too much on the women's, like women having relationships and the women's, like it took away from them being strong female characters. And, we sort of had a discussion, because we have like weird deep discussions on WhatsApp, and we were like, it is like subversive sort of to show like Black women sort of being happy in relationships and happy at work and getting everything that they want, like whatever that thing might be, whether it's a relationship or not a relationship. But yeah, I think there is sort of like this idea that if you're a strong female character, like you have to be strong in this one way, and that is so damaging because, I mean, if we just look around this room, we're all strong in different ways. Like, we're all competent at different things, whether they're small or big or whatever. We all have some sort of strength in us. So to be told again and again and again, you're not strong because, is hugely damaging no matter what color you are. But I think especially for if you're a marginalized woman. So that's sort of what I try to do in my books. Like, you know, you are competent and you are good. And even if you're competent in the most minor way, you're still good at something. You're still strong, even if you're not whatever box society has decided strength is for a woman.
And a lot rides on women. We do a lot of things. We never do just one thing. Like, my rant on the last episode of my podcast was about how all the productivity books that I read are written by guys who do one thing. And I'm like, okay, where's the book about productivity where I have a job and I run a company and I have these children and they eat all the time, and then there's something for the PTA again, and I don't know where the checkbook is. Like, where's the productivity for women who do 25 things in an hour? Like, I don't see that book. But you reminded me, actually, what you said, Alicia, reminded me of something in Alyssa's book. There's a scene in A Hope Divided where Ewan is thinking back on his mother. And his mother and his father, his father was abusive. And he realized that his mother knitting and just not accepting the abuse that he was taking, just sort of, he was giving her just knitting was in her control, and knitting was resisting. Knitting was control and strength in the face of chaos that she could not control. Even the most minor thing of knitting or cross-stitching or making something that gives you solace is strength.
And I just wanted to add one thing. I try to address that too because I see it play out in the real world, that, and on Twitter and things like that, where kind of people, especially with women of color, can start being like, oh, like, you're such a badass, so things like that when you are talking about something just because it's painful. And so it can be like really frustrating because you're like, no, I'm not a badass. I really wish I didn't have to talk about this. I'm only talking about it because I am being forced to. So like, it's not something to be celebrated. It's really so that's another thing that I think goes into.
Yeah, I think like sometimes when people say like badass, they forget that you're also a whole other human, like across from it, and you have
and that you can be vulnerable, yeah.
And maybe just because you're passionate about something, it doesn't make you like a strong female character. Yeah, you're not invincible.
Don't lie.
None of us
You
are.
sleep in high heels and leather pants. I know.
Well, I do.
Right, obviously. Obviously. Okay, I saw. Yes, ma'am. Bring me your question. Oh, so you're talking about like author quirks?
Yeah, they're in separate families. Yeah. I know. Yeah. Are there twins?
Yes.
No, they're not twins. They're a year apart. Yeah. They're Irish twins. Yes.
Like sexy food?
I don't think I don't know. Do you?
That's going to be the thing I notice, because I notice patterns when I'm reading and reviewing, and I'm
I
going to
think
notice
food.
those things.
I think food for me, because I'm usually hungry. Yeah, there's cannolis.
Yeah.
Okay, so Alyssa actually had a hand in the cannoli. So in Hate to Want You, there's like, you know, a cannoli scene. It's not what you're thinking. And
Wait, somebody gets shot?
there's just food. But Alyssa like read the first draft, and the only note she had was, this cannoli could be way sexier. So yeah, that's the only thing I think I can think of. As far as like, I usually do have a lot of siblings. Like I will do, because I'm used to big families. And as far, I don't think I have, I think I just have the Forbidden Hearts, the two twins, and my first book has pair of twins, but I've got like 13 books, so that's not too many, I don't think. But I know a lot of like twins. I think our generation just has a lot of twins in it, because everyone was like doing IVF. I don't know. It's a lot of multiples, I think, going around. But.
For me, I think friendships. Because generally I try to have the friendships be as important as the romantic relationship. And we were talking about this yesterday, but I realized outdoor sex.
Alyssa has a lot lot of sex in her book.
Seriously, you guys.
I didn't think about it. Like, it wasn't a purposeful thing, and I don't know why.
I made a list. Like, 'cause she started like, well, wait, there was that one time, and then
And
the other one was like,
wait.
yeah.
Yeah, so that,
It actually says in my notes here, banging locations. That was going to be one of my questions.
so yeah, that was an unconscious pattern, I guess.
Oh yeah, patterns are never conscious.
No, yeah.
Not ever. So one of your patterns is that your characters always feed each other. There's always.
Oh.
Your characters always
I'm
feed each
usually
other.
hungry.
And then in your books, one of the characters almost always has a specialty. They have a very special high level of competence. And what happens is
That
the
is
other
true, yeah.
character will do something to assist that character with their competency.
I like people helping each other. Yes.
Yep. I'm
She's a
horrible.
Hufflepuff.
I would be a terrible editor.
She's a Hufflepuff.
Oh.
It's like the helper branch
You're
of the
both
Hogwarts.
Hufflepuffs.
We are.
Come on. All right. I saw another question. So your question, if I heard you correctly, is before they were published, were they pressured to write differently than what they write now, to write more mainstream and white? And you used a really good word, and it's just flown right out of traditional. Thank you. Books and characters before they were published. Is that the question? Okay, thank you.
I'll go because mine is shorter, I'm sure, because you have way more books than me. But me, no, not exactly. My first books were published at smaller presses that that were more open to different kinds of characters. And also, I kind of, around the same time that I was published, was also, if there were and there were people who didn't want the books, they didn't say why. So, it's not like, no one was like, you need to change this character to be a certain way. But, for everyone, your books get rejected for whatever reason. But also books that I thought would be a harder sell, and also because I'm impatient, I just self-published them. My first historicals were self-published in anthologies that I found other people who wanted to write similar things and just said, hey, let's do this. And then by the time I was going to submit historicals to publishers, again, not everyone wanted it because it doesn't fit every catalog and for various reasons, but and I had weird feedback from some agents or people who were interested telling me to change things that would make it very weird, like wanting Malcolm in the first book to be more dominant. And I'm like, did you read this book? She's posing
Can
as
you
a
wear
slave.
a tie?
She
And
cannot.
can it be gray?
She cannot. This can't be 50 Shades of Slavery. This is not gonna happen. Oh, okay. I'm not gonna get into that. Okay. Anyway, let's not go. Okay. But anyway, no. I haven't really had people trying to change anything to be more traditional. In my experience. They just didn't take it if they didn't want it.
So I started publishing almost a decade ago, so it's been a while. 8 years, God, forever. And so my story is a little bit different in that I shopped my first book around and I got very positive interest, but the one publisher who was sort of ready really liked it, said, can you just make all the characters white though? And I was like, well, the heroine is a chef in an Indian restaurant. That's going to be really awkward. If she's suddenly white, is it going to be a meatloaf restaurant? What is the story here? So I was like, well, I don't know if I can just do that. That's hard, and I would change the whole story. But I had options because at the time digital publishing was really booming. So I was able to go to a small digital press, and go through that. And also they were telling me to change my name so it was less ethnic sounding. So it was a whole issue, but we're it's not that far ago.
Was it always Alisha Rai, or did you?
It was always yeah.
But that needed to be changed.
It was too ethnic sounding. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And I was like, so I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want to change the character's ethnicity because I would have had to basically rewrite the whole book. So I went to digital publishing, and they were really great. And they were, because at the time it was less risk for them, right? They could just put things out very quickly without worrying about like, will it sell because of the author's name or, you know, all this stuff, because they had very little investment in it. So that was how I started, basically, where I was like a little bit petty as well. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I did that. So yeah, it has, but times have changed, you know, like in 8 years, it's big leaps for my name not to be considered ethnic now, I guess.
And you've outlasted some of your publishers.
I have. Indeed, I have. Yes, I have. So, but then, yeah, and then I'm not going to do that cackle, but you can.
That's why I'm over here in this chair asking all the questions.
But yeah, so, and then I self-published for a while because it was sort of the same thing. There was a good amount of freedom, and also I was curious about it. And, you know, so like my journey is kind of like an inverted triangle. And I think it's true for a lot of actually women of color. Like our journeys didn't start like, you know, it used to be you started in Harlequin series and then got moved up to the big leagues. And then, you know, like that was a certain path that romance authors took. And now I think it's just all topsy-turvy. And one of the reasons is because a lot of us couldn't get in the door in the beginning, and as short as 8 years ago or a decade ago.
But like now you're in Target and in an independent bookstore, and you're in independent bookstores,
Yeah,
and
it's pretty cool.
you got starred reviews all over the place. There's a lot that's changed in the last few years.
Yeah, a lot has changed.
which is good.
Well, I think people are realizing that the audience is out there. I mean, and I think before they didn't maybe know, and I think social media has helped, and word of mouth and events like this. Like, you know, everything is sort of chicken and egg. Like, you can't do one without the other, and then it becomes a cycle. So I think once, you know, like you sort of can follow the trail, then, you know.
And readers are so very specific and smart about what they want. Like Amanda, my assistant, said this this week, that readers don't just say, oh, I'm looking for a cowboy romance. They want a cowboy with a mail order bride, set in this state at this time with a secret baby. Like we know the recipe of what we want, right? Like we have very specific things. So if you have a reader who's online saying, I would really like to read romances with Indian American families, there's going to be authors who are like, hello, it is so great to meet you. Let me introduce you to all of my books. You can make that.
And I think in addition to that, there are a lot of people who don't know they want to read that, and then they read it and they say, oh, this is awesome. Like a lot of, I've heard from various readers or people who gave my books to other, you know, people, like Farah Rashan was like, oh, I gave your book to, my science fiction book, to her neighbor who was like a 65-year-old white man in Louisiana who, and like, you know, that's awesome. But just that, you know, a bookseller or not a bookseller, like a sales team wouldn't say, oh, I'm going to market your book to a 65-year-old white man in Louisiana. They would say that's not in your demographic. But he loved the book, and then he got the rest of the series and he read it. And like one of the most interesting things about like being able to do tours and, well, not tours, but like visit bookshops and like go to conferences is that like meeting people who, if you went to a sales team and showed, you know, gave them their information, they would say that person's not going to read that book. And there are so many people reading widely and reading a variety of different things that I think there's like, so it's a two-pronged thing of like there are people who specifically are like, I am looking for something that I never really was able to, I was never able to really see myself in these books, and now I can, or I can see people like, you know, my friends and my family in these books. And then there are other people who are just like, oh, no one ever gave me this book to read, and I'm reading it, and it's cool, and I'm going to read more like it. So it's like a dual thing.
And part of it is just like authors. Like so many authors for so long were shut out of even getting their books in front of people that like I don't write only South Asian characters at all. But, you know, like I think it is like sort of a, you know, they may not be looking, they may just be looking for you and you don't know it. You know, they might just love your writing. It has nothing to do with who the characters are or what it's about. It's just, you know, and they don't know you because they can't find you. So like it has been, you know, it's been a struggle.
And yet the changes have been good.
The changes are coming. Slow but steady. That's.
I have gotten it's time to wrap up signal. Thank you. I
Very
was just checking. I appreciate that. So what are we going to do now?
We are going to have a signing.
Yes.
I'll stand up here. Round of applause for our authors and for Sarah.